The Eibach Sport System Plus suspension kit should appeal to the 94 to 04 V8 coupe owners, along with the 99 to 04 V6 convertible owners out there who are looking to completely change both the looks and the handling of their ride thanks to a few key components from one of the most trusted names in suspension. Now, these components do include a set of front and rear sway bars, a set of non-adjustable dampers, and then finally Eibach's very popular Sportline lowering springs, which are going to offer a very aggressive drop, offer right around $1,200. Now, the site does call this a soft 3 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter, which I feel is a bit extreme, but nevertheless, hang out till the end of the video and we'll show you how it's done. Now, first things first, guys, I do want to start with the drop here because this particular kit is certainly going to cater to those owners who prefer more of that slam look. In fact, you're getting a 2-inch drop for the front here thanks to the Sportline springs, along with a 1.8-inch drop for the rear. So that's a little too low for you in your ride. Then you can check out Eibach's Pro System Plus kit as well, which is simply just going to replace the Sportline springs in this package with the Pro Kit springs and reduce that drop a little bit. And by the way, of course, you can find that here on the site for a very similar price as this kit. But getting back to the Sportline lowering springs here, guys, and they are going to feature a progressive spring rate, which is always a nice thing to point out for street cars out there because they're going to balance comfort and performance thanks to the softer initial rates, which will be a little bit more comfortable while cruising. But then once you start rolling over onto these things a little bit more, they start firming up and giving you a bit more performance. Now, specifically, you're going to be looking at a starting rate of 550 pounds for the front springs and 251 pounds for the rears. Now, along with improved roll control, you're also going to be seeing subtle improvements in things like weight transfer, front to back, back to front, basically less brake dive when you're hammering on those brakes, and less squat when you're accelerating hard. And finally, guys, just flatter in turns, reduced body roll, things like that, all around performance improvement when going this hard on your suspension. But one thing I do enjoy about these complete kits from Eibach is that in this case, they paired up their Sportline springs with their Pro damper shocks here, basically making this a complete turnkey system. The reality is, guys, throwing this aggressive of a spring on your high mileage factory dampers is really only asking for a bad time, including a rough ride and accelerating the wear and tear on those factory dampers, possibly even blowing them out. Now, Eibach definitely recognized this and as such completed the Sport System Plus with their Pro dampers. So we've covered the Sportline lowering springs with this kit. We've even talked about the non-adjustable Pro dampers from Eibach. Last but not least, let's talk a little bit more about these sway bars because in my opinion, it just pulls the whole system together and really offers a nice increase in handling performance. Now, you're going to be looking at a non-adjustable bar up front here, along with a 2-way adjustable bar in the back, and basically just huge improvements over the factory bars that you are replacing. Now, specifically, you're going to be looking at a 35mm tubular front bar, along with the 25mm solid rear bar here. And that tubular front construction is nice because it's going to save you a little bit of weight compared to some of those heavier solid options, but without really compromising any stiffness or strength. Now, by upgrading both the front and rear bars together, the car will feel more responsive overall, certainly be flatter in turns thanks to that reduced body roll, but at the same time, depending on how you set the bars up, should help rotate the car through the turns a little bit better than before. Now, this should be a welcome change because in the factory form, these cars tend to have the slightest bit of understeer, meaning the car just wants to push or plow through those turns. With these bigger bars in place from Eibach, the car will certainly experience a more neutral balance, if you will, and maybe a little bit more oversteer depending on how you set that rear bar up. Ultimately, the sway bars working with the Sportline springs and the dampers should make the car feel like a completely different animal on the street, especially when you really start throwing it around in turns. Now, these Eibach sway bars have been made right here in the USA from cold-formed, high-strength aircraft-grade steel before being finished off in this bright red powder coat to help prevent any corrosion over the years. Now, Eibach does toss in a lot of nice little extras with this system, including your jounce bumpers, dust shields, greasable polyurethane bushings, and rear sway bar links. However, they do not include any front end links in addition to new spring isolators, which, by the way, I highly recommend picking up with this kit because chances are the factory isolators on your SN are probably pretty trashed. But what do you say we get into the installation? And again, guys, the site does go soft 3 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter here, but To give you a better idea of what's really involved for this job, here is a detailed walkthrough along with the tool breakdown.
Tools required for this installation are going to be a 1/2-inch drive, 3/8 as well as a 1/4, various extensions, sockets ranging from 8mm all the way up to 24, also an E8 E-bit socket, wrenches ranging from 10mm up to 15 as well as a 9/16, pushpin removal tool or a flathead is very helpful, pry bar, a caliper hanger, optional tools will be an impact, air ratchet, and this 1/2-inch air impact, and also a pry bar. All right, so we're gonna start off in the back and we need access to our trunk. And we're gonna remove a few trim pieces in here, the sides to get access to the top of our shock. But right here on this trim piece, there are 4 push pins. And I have a push pin removal tool. If you don't have one, you can use a flathead screwdriver. So let's remove all 4 of these. Again, they're push pins like a Christmas tree type. There's 2 on each side of that hinge plate. Just lift that piece out of the way. And then on the back side of your trunk, you're gonna see 2 plastic screws. You can use a flathead. There is a little slot right there for it. We're just gonna spin it off with our finger. And these are just like a plastic nut type deal. Just like that. All right, now with those 2 nuts and 4 push pins removed, we are going to get this panel out of the way, set it off to the side. So we're also going to remove the 2 side panels that cover our shock towers in the rear. These will just slide out of the way, just off to the side there. And that will expose the nut for the top of our shock. Do that on both sides. All right, so I have my air ratchet right here. It's a 3/8 drive with a deep 15mm socket. We are going to loosen up and remove the nuts on top of our shock. So do that on both sides. And now when we lift the vehicle in the air, those shocks will drop out. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and get our wheels and tires off. All right, so one of our first steps in the uninstall process is to get this quad shock out of the way. So if you have a GT or a convertible version, you will have this quad shock here. I have an 18mm socket. I'm just gonna remove that nut and take the quad shock off of that stud. Just pull it like that and let it sit. Do that on both sides. All right, so since we had to remove the nut on the top of our shock, what we're after now is the bolt here. It's a 15mm head and an 18mm nut on the back side. So I'm just gonna pull the bolt and then get the shock out of the way. Do that on both sides as well. All right, so now we're going to remove our rear sway bar. First, we're gonna get this wheel speed sensor out of the way and off of this bracket here. And then we're going to use a 14mm socket to remove the 2 bolts on this side and the 2 bolts on the other. And then the sway bar will just slide out of the way. So as you see on this bolt right here, you're gonna have a parking brake bracket. You're just gonna slide that out of the way. We'll reattach that when we put our new sway bar in. Now I'm gonna get the last 2 bolts out and slide this sway bar out of the way. All right, so you can see that I have 2 pole jacks supporting the entire weight of my rear end. I'm going to get the last bolt that holds in my sway bar out of the way. And you can see these handles are facing straight back. So hopefully this sway bar will land on there. There is a little bit of weight, so if you have a friend to help you out, I highly recommend you grab them. So I'm gonna give 1 hand to the bar and 1 hand to my impact and get this bolt out of here. There's that side. And I'm gonna pull this bolt. And there is our factory sway bar out of the way. So minus your upper and lower control arms, those are the only things that are attaching your rear axle to the body of the Mustang. So now I'm going to lower my jack stands evenly, both at the same time. And then I'm going to lower one side a little lower than the other so I can angle it and get that spring out of there. So as you can see, there's no tension on that, but there is on this. And if I pull on this side of the axle, I can get that spring out. So I'm gonna lower it down even more to get some more travel out of it. Just like that. And now I can get my spring out of there. All right, so we are just in front and above the rear end. There are 3 8mm bolts holding this snubber nose right here, and we're going to remove it and replace this rubber piece right here. So again, this is an 8mm. I've got it on my 1/4-inch drive. I'm just gonna remove these 3 screws. All right, now we're gonna replace our snubber with this much smaller one. We are going to use a 1/2-inch impact for this. Change my socket up to a 14mm. Tighten this up. All right, so now we're going to start with our install in the rear. First with our snubber back here. These are those 8mm bolts we pulled out just a little earlier. Definitely want to try to start these by hand before you get in there with your tool, make it a little easier. All right, so I have a little tip for you when installing your rear springs. You can see that there is some tape right here. That is actually from the factory, so the factory does this as well. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna make sure that we have the right orientation. You can see where our stock spring sat before. We're gonna make sure that the Eibach spring sits in the same spot, and we're going to tape that in place. So when we are maneuvering this thing into place, the top isolator does not rattle off or jump off as they are known to do. So we're just gonna put some electrical tape on here. We're not gonna have to worry about this thing rotting out or causing any extra noise underneath there. So do this on both sides, and then we'll get these installed. All right, these Eibach springs are gonna be really nice and easy to get into because we are dropping the rear about 2 inches. So we're gonna make sure that that rubber isolator on the bottom is there as well. And I'm going to put a little tension just to make sure this spring does not pop out. Again, make sure that it is seated correctly on that bottom isolator and that the top is sitting square on that. Just going to tighten up this distance here and then get the other spring in. All right, so what we're gonna do next is get our sway bar into place. I'm gonna bring a buddy in here in a second to get one of our bolts started. I'm gonna put the other bolt in the other side. So let's get this into place. And then he should be able to put the bolt through now. All right, there's that one. Let me get this side in. And then I will get another bolt on this side just to hold it up. All right, so what we're gonna do now is put the nuts onto the bolts, securing our sway bar to our lower control arm. Now you do have to thread these on through the back side of it. So I just used a wrench to hold my nut, and then I used an impact on the other side to tighten up our bolt. Now for the one towards the rear, I'm going to pull it out, bring my parking brake cable back in, lift up on it, and get my new bolt through that hole and into our new sway bar. Just run that bolt in a little bit. Now I'm going to get another nut. On my wrench and bring that close to my bolt. All right, now we're gonna do that on both sides. All right, so let's install our rear shocks. You can see that we have our dust boot on there as well as our bump stop and lower portion of our rubber isolators. I have the other rubber isolators in the trunk ready to install when we get the vehicle back on the ground. But let's guide these things up into our body mount there. And we are going to reuse our factory hardware on the bottom. It was that 15 millimeter bolt with an 18 millimeter nut on the back side. All right, so with our shock in place, let's go ahead and tighten up this hardware. All right, so now we're gonna get our quad shock back into place. We're just gonna slip it right over that stud. Make sure that bushing goes back into place. These are the 18 millimeter nuts we took off in the first clip. All right, so there are a few different ways that you can get the top of your shock tightened up. You can put the wheels back on and lower the car back onto the ground. That is going to push the shock back up into the body mount. I'm not gonna do it that way. I have the vehicle lowered down to the ground, a jack right underneath the center of the differential, and I'm going to jack up on it and watch what happens to the top of the shock here. Make sure you have enough threads to work with and that you're not pushing the car off the lift or jack stands. And then we're going to put our rubber isolator, and then the top of it right over that stud. And then we're gonna start our nut on top of that. All right, so the nuts for the top of our shock are going to be a 9/16. And I'm going to use my air ratchet to tighten those down. And that's exactly what you want right there, that rubber isolator nice and squished. All right, so moving on to the front, you can see that I have both of my wheels and tires off. I've already disconnected the sway bar end link on the driver's side. So I'm gonna do the same on the passenger side here. It's a 15 millimeter nut. So let's get this nut off and this bushing as well. If that doesn't come off, it's fine. You can usually hit the sway bar up and both those bushings will pop. So next we're gonna get both of our end links out of here as well as our sway bar because our kit comes with new end links, sway bar, and bushings. All right, so now we're gonna remove our sway bar end links. Again, I have that 15 mil deep socket on my air ratchet, and then I have a 10 millimeter wrench on the shaft of the end link just to keep it from spinning. Just gonna start this nut. And pull that end link out of here. Remove that on both sides. All right, now we're going to remove our sway bar. You can see this is our mounting point with our bushing in there. These are 16 millimeter nuts. There are 2 on each side. And this plastic piece right here, we're actually gonna snake it through. So I'm going to buzz these off. Hoping that plastic is going to keep it up while I remove the other side. I'm going to snake this out of here. So there are some push pins that we can remove on the inside of here. Let me get my tool real quick. This inner fender. So there's that push pin. It's a Christmas tree type clip. We are going to slide our sway bar out of the way. All right, so what we're gonna do now is remove our caliper and rotor. First, starting with our caliper, we're gonna take the whole unit off. So we're after these two 15mm bolts on the back side. Let's get a breaker bar on here first. Make sure that we can loosen them up. All right, and let me get my air ratchet in here. And just to get ready, I have my caliper hanger right there. I'll keep that where my body bolt is. Where is this guy? All right, and then we're gonna hang this caliper out of the way. All right, so next up, we're gonna remove our rotor. If you haven't replaced your brakes or removed your rotor yet, you may still have these factory locking washers. R99 only has about 40,000 miles on it, so these are the original brakes. And we're going to remove these little metal washers, like the lock tabs that hold your rotor onto the hub itself. So you don't need to replace these or put them back on. I'll show you a trick when I reinstall the wheel, how to get your rotor to stay in place. But I just bend it so it's a missed shape and then just spin it off. Now we can pull our rotor off. All right, so what we're gonna do next is remove our wheel speed sensor or our ABS sensor right here. And we need an E8 E-bit. So it's like an inverted Torx. And I have this on my 1/4-inch drive, so I'm just going to loosen this up and remove it. Because we gotta separate our spindle from our strut here in a second. And we don't wanna cause any unnecessary stress on this wheel speed sensor because they aren't cheap. All right, so that's out. Then I'm going to take a push pin removal tool and go up this line, removing any of the push pins. All right, so let's remove that wheel speed sensor. I'm just gonna push it in the front and pull it in the back as well at the same time. This has not been removed since new. There's a lot of road grime on that. All right, so that's out. Then I'm gonna take my push pin removal tool and get this loom out of the way. And then lift up on these. Just get that out of the way. Again, this is a magnet, so you can just stick it to a body part and it'll be out of the way. All right, so our next step is to remove this 124mm nut holding this little brake line bracket in place. So just spin this off. We are going to attach that again later. And then we're going to lower the vehicle down to the ground so we can get a jack onto the lower control arm. And then we're going to remove the 2 nut and bolts holding our strut assembly to our spindle. And what that will do is release the tension on that pocket spring so we can lower the jack, get that spring out, and get our strut out all at the same time. All right, so as you can see, I have a jack directly under my lower control arm. The vehicle is pretty low to the ground. And what I'm going to do is now jack up on my jack and take up some of that tension on my pocket spring. Now I can remove the nut and bolt on my lower strut assembly. I'm going to need a 21mm socket for my bolt head on this side, and then a 24mm socket for my nut side. Let's go ahead and get our tools in place here. All right, there's the first nut. And let's get the second one out of here. Second nut, I'm going to try to pull one of these bolts out. All right, there's one, there's two. Then I'm going to let my spindle just hang out here. And you see my strut is free now. Now I can lower my jack slowly and have this pocket spring come out. But first I'm going to remove my strut so I have some more room to play with. All right, now we're going to remove our strut. We'll start off by removing these nuts. These are 15mm. Now I'm going to hold on to my strut, take out this last bolt. Grab that and remove your strut. All right, so now I'm going to release the tension on my jack and watch what happens to my pocket spring. It's gonna wanna fall out of there. So I may need a pry bar to help get it out. That's what we're gonna do now. All right, so there may still be a little bit of tension on this spring, so just be very careful and wary of that. And there it goes. All right, so before we can start installing our new parts onto our Mustang, we have to swap a couple things over, including our sway bar bushing brackets. Now these don't require any tools, they just require a little bit of muscle. But what I like to do is just slip them to the side, slip that bracket out. And then you can just hit that bracket off. And then what we're gonna do is put the bushing around our sway bar, bring our bracket over and onto that bushing. Do that on both sides. Make sure the bushing goes on there nice and square. Then you can lock it down with this. All right, now we're gonna move on to our struts. All right, moving on to our struts, we have to remove our top hat and move that over to our new Eibach unit. So I have a 21mm socket on my 1/2" impact, and I'm going to hope that this nut just buzzes off the top. If not, it is slotted on the top for a flathead screwdriver, but sometimes this will work. It's almost there. And there's the nut. So I'm going to take this bushing out of here, as well as the top hat itself. And I want to make sure it is installed all in the same direction. So we're actually going to keep this dust boot as well. All right, so now we're going to assemble our new strut. Dust boot first, followed by our top hat and bushing. Cap, then our 24mm nut, All right, so for our install, what we're gonna do first is put our pocket spring back into our lower control arm and our body mount. I am first going to take this lower isolator out of here off our stock spring and transfer it over to our new Eibach. Now this is kind of rusted on there, so bear with me a second. All right, and you can see the height difference on these. That's where you're gonna get your about 2-inch drop in the front. Let's go ahead and slip this on. Just until you see that coil. And this is the bottom side. So let's lower the control arm here. I may need to get my pry bar out, hook it onto my lower control arm here, just behind my brake dust shield here. All right, so there you have it. The spring is sitting in the pocket. Now I'm gonna get the jack back underneath the control arm, jack up on my control arm, and get my strut into place. All right, so now we're going to install our new strut assembly. Those studs, again, are going to go towards the inside of the body here. I'm going to put those nuts on first. Followed by that one bolt. And I'll get my 15mm and tighten those up. All right, so as you can see, I have my jack positioned right under my control arm, and I'm going to jack this up and get my spindle to line up with my strut. But I wanted to show you these little shims that Eibach included with this kit. This bottom of the strut is a little bit wider than your factory strut, so they do include these to make up that difference. Let's go ahead and jack up on this control arm, get the right position of my spindle. Make sure my bolt holes are lining up. Right about there. Now I'm going to slip 1 or 2 of these shims into place while getting my bolt in there as well. It's gonna be a little tough to see on camera. There's the top. And bottom one is started. And I'm going to slip my forward shim in. So here's the second shim. You can shimmy the strut and get that into place. And you can also use a flathead screwdriver. All right, so there's that top bolt made it through. Just gotta make sure the bottom one can. Looks like I gotta kick it out a little bit. And there's the bottom one. Let's go ahead and put our 24mm nuts back on there. All right, and then we're gonna tighten these up with my 1/2-inch impact, 24 on the nut side and a 21 on the bolt side. All right, so what we're gonna do now is install our sway bar. Again, you're gonna have to snake this into place. Get this other side up and in first. Start a couple of your nuts. You're gonna wanna make sure both of your brackets are through those bolt holes. All right, let's tighten those up with our 16mm socket. All right, what we're gonna do now is go ahead and install our end links to our lower control arm and our sway bar itself. Now this is a one-piece design, so we're gonna completely remove all the top stuff. Go ahead and slip in the bottom. Put that stuff back on. Put the shaft on. Let's swing this out of the way a little bit since the other side is not connected. Put our bottom bushing on. And go ahead, lower this. All right, so with your sway bar end link assembled, we're gonna top it off with the last top bushing and the cup. Put our 9/16 nut on the top. Then I'm going to put a wrench on the top and an impact on the bottom. Go ahead and squish these bushings down. Should be good right about there. All right, so we're gonna get our wheel speed sensor in now. This is gonna go in the same spot with that E8 E-bit head bolt. All right, make sure that's nice and tight, but not too tight, because that is a plastic sensor. All right, let's go ahead and get this bracket on. And you can't mess these up because they are labeled right hand and left hand. These slip over the rest of the thread showing on your spindle bolts. And this low profile 24mm nut will go onto that. Go ahead and tighten that up. And then we can slip our wheel speed sensor line back onto that. And plug our bracket back in like that. All right, now we're gonna reassemble our brakes, starting with our rotor. I'll slip that right on, and then we're gonna grab our caliper, get that bracket off there. Make sure our rotor is nice and squarely on there. Slide our caliper pads over. Grab your two 15mm bolts. Go ahead and start these. And I have my air ratchet here. And I'll do my final tighten with my regular ratchet wrench. All right, so that's gonna wrap up the passenger side. Repeat all those steps on the driver's side to complete that install. Don't forget to tighten down your lug nuts and get in alignment. All right, that's gonna wrap up my install. And for all things Mustang, keep it here at AmericanMuscle.com.